welcome to this conversation. Welcome to Maison&Objet. As you all know, this is the 30th year and 30th anniversary of Maison&Objet, so it's a lot to celebrate. And I'm very honoured to be here with this panel today where we're talking, discussing the Rising Talent Awards, which I'm not sure if you've had a chance to go and have a look at, but they're over in Hall 6. So to see some of the talents from the Rising Talent Awards, which is based on the theme of tech and savoir-faire. And in honouring young designers and researchers who are pushing boundaries and exploring the new frontier of digital technology that we're seeing today, the awards is looking ahead to what the future holds and kind of how we strike that balance between age-old craft and future technology. Just to introduce myself, I'm Roddy Clarke. I'm a design journalist, and I focus on a wide variety of topics. And I'm excited to be joined by Jean de Loisy, the art critic, former director of the Palais de Tokyo, and Joseph Grima, the director of design at the Academy of Eindhoven, and two of this year's rising talents, Audrey and Jenna Kaës. So it's going to be a very sort of interesting conversation looking at artists and designers who are working in the midst of technology whilst discussing the tradition and the years of know-how that has led up to this point as well. I think coming to you first, John, it would be really good to get your experience. You were on the jury for this year's Rising Talent Awards, and it would be lovely to know how that experience was for you.
It's very interesting to try to find in the discussion the solution to be the more ambiguous possible. I mean, where is the overlap between techniques and thoughts that can bring you and the artist to new questions in a way? And that's something that happened in the discussion with those four winners of this prize, and with very different trends. And it was extremely exciting mentally for that.
Do you feel optimistic when you're seeing this emerging talent come through?
I'm very optimistic about this. I think we are in a turn point moment, which is extremely interesting. It has never been as diverse as it is at the moment. So you have the main and the most exciting artists at the moment that are working, some with purely technology, some with purely industry, some with purely objects and sculpture ideas. And in fact, you can feel more and more that there will be a multiplicity, not only of trends. That's now obvious. It was not the case in the 1930s, or for Mingay, or for art and craft in England. But in this moment, you have this feeling that the overlap between all those directions will create something that could change totally the view of the way we are living with objects. Not as the constructivists were doing it, not as Bauhaus was doing it, but as something which mixes absolute singularity and the possible of a multiplicity.
And obviously with your background as well, you know, you've seen design and art, I guess, change and address current topics over the past decades. Do you feel now it's more dynamic than ever before?
In fact, it is, how could I say, it is less... there is no separation as it was before. Before, if you were a craftsman, you were craft. If you were a visual artist, you absolutely don't work with craft. If you were working for industries, etc., you don't discuss with the people that are doing barbaric objects like it was in the end of the 80s, for instance. And now, suddenly, all this overlap and the question of the mystery of the presence of an object that can be unique but can also be multiplicate. It's very interesting and it is very new. So which is happening is that the walls are broken for the first time in the last 5-6 years, and it is a totally new landscape that is coming.
It's an exciting, it's what we're witnessing, I think, at the moment with that kind of cross-section of craft and technology is a very exciting place to be. But Joseph, coming to you, I think it would be great if you could introduce yourself firstly to the audience, but again, give us an insight as to your experience being on the panel this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's, well, Joseph Grima, obviously, and I've been since 2018 creative director at Design Academy Eindhoven, which is an incredible privilege because it means continual exposure to designers who are really questioning the very essence of what design is. So it's even for myself, and I'm kind of accustomed to it, especially after now 6 years, still an experience which is continually stimulating, but even continually jarring or a little bit disorienting, because it's as if every year what the students are doing is attempting to challenge what we understand design to be at that given moment in time. And so it's a school that has cultivated, as Audrey also has shown us, an incredible tradition of challenging the status quo and using design as a way of understanding the world around us. And I think that that's something very interesting. It also goes back to what Jean was saying about design being something that is very different from what it has been in the past. And I think if we think of 1 century ago, you could say, in many ways, certainly kind of in terms of sort of common understanding, the figure of the designer didn't even really exist. It's something that has evolved quite rapidly and at an accelerating pace in recent years. So this, the experience of having the opportunity to reflect a little bit on who is emerging, who is doing interesting work, who is challenging our understanding of what design is always very it's a wonderful experience. It's also great to see, aside from talents who I consider to be of great importance today, also those who others see to be of great importance, like Jenna. So it's a great privilege and a wonderful experience.
And in terms of technology, there is an element of, I guess, fear of the unknown. How would you, I mean, in your view, is it creating wider opportunity? How can we sort of debunk that fear, I guess?
Actually, a few years ago, we were invited with Space Caviar, the studio. We have also Sophia here, my partner in the first row. We were invited to sort of curate, so to speak, or be the sort of guest creative directors. I can't remember exactly what the role was, of Saint-Étienne Design Biennale. And that year the theme was World Without Work, the idea of a post-labor society, very much in response to the topic that was it was coming increasingly into the mainstream of automation and technology as a replacement for human labor. And our reflection was very much triggered by this, the observation that in fact it's one of the oldest fears of humanity, is that of being replaced, of technology coming in and taking away what we love to do and what keeps us alive as well, what gives us, in a way, purpose in the world. But at the same time, the fascination with technology, the fact that it's something that we can't live with and we can't live without. It's something we're terrified with, but we're also completely fascinated by. And I think that applies now at the distance of 6 or 7 years more than ever. I think now, of course, it's taken a little bit. It's no longer about automation today. It's about AI. Every year there's like a new buzzword, a new sort of topic of our... but ultimately it's really the same thing. It's the fear that somehow our creativity will be taken away from us and technology will take over. But ultimately, I think, and I think this is where Audrey's work is incredibly relevant. It's showing a path towards an understanding of technology that's made up primarily of collaboration rather than of competition, or of unlocking the potential and finding also, in a way, accentuating or highlighting even more the importance of human creativity as these new tools are coming to become available to us.
I think you're right. I think I grew up, my dad was a restorer. So, watching him physically work on items, and, there was always a sense of pride in creating things. And I guess there is that fear of, technology coming in and removing that element of, I guess, fulfillment from our lives. But as designers like Audrey and Jenna are proving, there is this beautiful balance that can be found. So I think that brings us on to you, Audrey, actually. If you could introduce yourself to the audience and I guess introduce your work as well.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Audrey. I'm French, but I graduated from the Design Academy of Eindhoven in 2017, and since then I'm based in the Netherlands, where I pursue my research and I work as an independent designer. I would say that my practice is situated in between art and design, but I mainly work with technologies that are related to digital images. So I'm a lot in the computer, and I try to bridge those technologies of images to digital fabrication in order to rethink object design methodologies, but also maybe further than that, the way we are looking and thinking and relating to matter in a broader sense, also through the digital lens. So, well, firstly, let's say, as an introduction.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you work, within both the virtual and the physical. Sorry, I think this is cutting in and out. How do you sort of blend those two together, and how do you bring them together?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think these two realms as a great divide. Also, if I look at myself, the way I navigate within reality and within the world as a human being, for me it's a reality that is very much more complex than unique. So I'm trying to navigate these multiplicities also within my practice and my making practice. So this is the whole point of it, is to, I have this question: how should we think about matter if matter became an image, and how to bridge those image-related tools to manipulate and design our material surroundings. So in my practice, I blend both. I would say that first of all, the work is within the file, and this file contains multiple potentialities. And when I 3D print or when I materialize through digital fabrication this file, the material outcome is one possibilities out of the multiplicities of this file. So for me, it's more about looking at matter in a state of transition, matter that can be sometime material, sometime digital, but that is made to travel these different types of states, these different states, basically.
And you say a lot of your work is influenced by physical techniques. Can you explain more about that? I think even though you produce digitally, you say a lot of the forms are sort of influenced and inspired by physical techniques.
I wouldn't use the word inspiration. It's not about... it's more that you might wonder if my pieces are made by a human or by a machine, because they are interestingly quite organic and alive. But I think it's more a dialogue of myself using the computer as a tool, not as a space for simulation, but as a space where new type of forms and archetype can emerge. And I usually work with 3D modeling softwares, but I don't 3D model through parametric 3D modeling, which is modeling with face and dots and lines. I use more a sculpting approach, and I start, for example, for this type of project with a digital material that has property that looks more like clay. So it's more about shaping this malleable and fluid material, and I used to define my practice for a long time as a drawing practice, because I sculpt this digital matter with a pen and a graphic tablet. So I think you can feel the pieces are digital, but they are also very human, because they are carrying the movement of my hand. And then the computer, the 3D printer, is of course just tools and technologies that gravitate around us and that I use in my own sensitivity. So it's more about approaching those technology in a sensitive way to create objects as little words.
It's amazing, yeah, no. And definitely try and get to Hall 6 where Audrey's got her work on display, because you'll see that very sort of human to the digitally produced pieces. Jenna, coming on to you, if you could introduce yourself to the audience and explain the inspirations behind your work too.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm French and I'm based in Paris. I'm working mostly on domesticity, and I do a little bit of jewelry too. My main subjects are spirituality and funerals in our contemporary settings. Since few years, I'm also working on public projects, like stained glass windows for churches, for example, or the last public project that I finished was in a cemetery, an historical cemetery in Bordeaux, where I did a columbarium. It's the place where you put funeral urns, and it goes also with a souvenir garden. So, to be very synthetic about the work.
And where did your work sort of stem from initially? Sort of this of your work's very symbolic in a lot of ways. Where does that come from?
It's hard to answer this shortly and just on one thing. It can come from a word. It can come from an habit, from a story. I think all my project start with a kind of a mental collage of stuff that has nothing to do, but finally they are all linked like with magical bridges. And if I should really think about the main and first inspiration, I had like many years ago this one-way mental love relationship with a painter that is Gaspard David Friedrich, a famous 19th century painter from the German Romantic school of painting. I bet you know it. So he was painting like dramatic or very peaceful landscape painting with always this beautiful grace inside. And when I dived into why did he choose to paint landscape, I understood that David Friedrich and the other people from the Romantic painting period, or not only painting, poets also, like novelists and all these people, they wanted, by the landscape, for example, with Friedrich, to show what is inside us. So it's like, for him, the landscape and the painting was like the mirror of what is happening inside us. And that really opened my mind, and it's still a mantra for me to think about how can we, how to say this, making it existing something that is totally invisible. How could we shape? I speak about shape because I do object, but for him it was painting. How could we bring to visible something that is totally invisible and that is inside, like feeling, like the loss of someone, like etc. So maybe this was the main inspiration. Yeah,
no, it's fascinating. You really, when you look at your work, you get that sort of, it's very evocative and it's very emotional. And you kind of connect to it in every sort of so many different ways. But in terms of the craft and the making of the pieces, you have partnered with a lot of traditional craftspeople and experts. Can you explain more about that process and maybe how that has influenced your work as well?
Yeah, sure. I do a lot of, I call them collaboration when it's with experts in craft. The most vibrant experience I had with craft was in Greenland. I spent 2 months there, and I was very lucky to spend time with women working in a tannery. And together we worked on a traditional tanning technique with the guts of the animal they eat there. And I think it learned me a lot, not about only this craft, but with all the philosophy that goes with their techniques. I think we have a lot to learn from these people, because with the know-how they have and they keep from before, there is a whole way of seeing life and the sense of life, a whole philosophy.
And how important is it for us to capture in the world of art and design, how important is it for us to capture those narratives that go back centuries to ensure that they don't die out?
Because we are human from today, I think our brains are filters from contemporaneity, and seeing the past from today already modifies the perspective of this traditional stuff, history.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there's such an element of, connection, I guess, through art and design. And I think opening up to the wider panel, it'll be really interesting to kind of get your thoughts on, I guess we've become used to feeling sort of connected to the world of art and design through physical pieces, but that's all changing. What are your perspectives on that? Maybe, Jean, coming to you.
We were speaking in the 80s and 90s very much about ergonomy. What is the best position we can have on a chair? And in fact, when I see those artists, Audrey and Jenna, I have the impression that the ergonomy is becoming the subject for the mind and not only for the body. And suddenly you have an object that you have to investigate, to think about, to dream from, which is the ergonomy of the mind. And this is a very strong evolution in a way. Of course, you had always in objects in the past, and with artists like Gaetano Pesce or Marie or others, you had always a connotation of the object, that it was the illustration or very beautiful, some meanings that were very beautiful and poetic. But now there is a way of saying, what is beauty for us today? What can I dream about when I look at an object? Is it a unique object for me, or can I share it? What is the object that can let exist a personal ritual? Because in fact, the rituals are extremely interesting moment in the individual life. They can be collective, of course, but they can be in the individual life. For instance, when Jenna is working with the funeral urns, it is very interesting because suddenly you have, first, it's a critique of what is the funeral art and production now, which is a disaster and means something which is collective, which is a misunderstanding of what is our relation with the dead. So it's very interesting already. And then you have the imagination that something that is very important, that goes with you for the years after you lost someone, can have a quality of relation through an object which is meaningful and which is not kitsch, which is not industrial, that could be industrial, but not only industrial. And suddenly you have the idea of a real mental and spiritual ergonomy of the object. And this interests me very much. For instance, I was looking at your work, and I was also very interested by the titles of your work. The Celestial, what's the title?
Proceedings.
Voilà. And so I look at the shape, and it's called those Celestial
Proceedings.
And I try to make a connection between the movement of the planets and this. And is it dystopic because it looks a bit like a disorganization, or is it a cosmic symbol, or is it the movement that we can't feel, but maybe we can guess, but we can't really see of the world? So even if I am very far of the intention or the meaning of the artist, there is a possibility of investigating and creating your own roots. And this is not at all anymore an object, it is a spirit. And there I become to be interested.
And Audrey, do you think there is that questioning from designers today, like yourself, about sort of, I guess, what we are a part of? I think we've been used to sort of being working in kind of silos, I guess, sort of previously, but the world is more connected than ever right now. And there's always this kind of questioning that we're part of something greater and bigger. Do you think that is kind of a general theme that you're seeing across the design world today as well?
I mean, I do think design reflects reality and the state of the world in general, but sometimes you can use design to tell about the world, and not in order to make a product that would integrate this world. So, I mean, this is a big question and it's complex.
It is, yeah.
But I mean, I would turn it more in a way that when I try to work and also in the practice every day, of course I try to imbue my work and the piece I do with as much of emotion and of human and of myself within it. Not to make a comment about me, but more with this idea that when I put this emotion in the artifact, it will afterwards have its own life relating to a viewer and an audience, and in this way it can become more than an object, and it become powerful because it can convey some type of emotion, or also trigger imagination, also challenge the way we perceive the real. So
yeah. I mean, that for me is where art is such a powerful tool for change. You know, it can provoke conversation and thought and change, you know, in so many different ways. Do you think that's where technology, Joseph, really sort of is going to sort of amp up that element of, I guess, connection with viewers and people that, you know, are looking at a piece?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at sort of a historical trajectory of various disciplines, technology has always been a sort of a dominant presence, like the way in which art, design, even architecture, other disciplines as well reflect the technique of the time is, that's a kind of a constant. But at the same time, I think that in a way art, artistic practice has historically always eluded definition, the thing that is, in a way, the only constant is that there is no constant. That there's always, it's always something that's escaping boundaries and escaping any sort of... yesterday we went to visit the Rothko exhibition at the Fondation Louis Vuitton, and of course Rothko, I mean, he's a very well-known figure and in a way kind of paradigmatic in terms of his artistic trajectory, which reflects the movement throughout the 20th century away from figurative art, the introduction of abstract expressionism, abstraction in general, towards conceptual art and so on. And that trajectory is obviously responding to, I mean, in his case, the sort of the term that was very frequently recurring throughout the exhibition was this sort of struggle with human form and the desire to escape from the trap of mutilating it. And I think you could really say the same thing in design in a way. I think that the emergence of new expressions of design, such as the work of Audrey or Jenna as well, which I think not so long ago would have been really provocative to define this as design work. It absolutely does not correspond to the expectations of 2 or 3 decades ago of what a designer could be doing, is perhaps, and maybe this is a question also, possibly an attempt to escape from the kind of a certain form of mutilation as well, like somehow to deal with topics that are important, like, as in the case of Rothko, the human experience, the human figure, and the sort of the existential question of what it means to be human, and to do that without mutilating it. But I'm not sure what if that resonates with you at all, and if so, what you're trying to not mutilate.
I mean, I think it's more that I do, or maybe also to go back to your question, I do think that we are not, and I think it's also parts that are coming now way more also in the art scene. We are not discrete entities that are disconnected from each other, and in that way, if you start to design, treat objects and matter in a way that they can be more than just a useful thing, then you would start to rethink about your relation to the world in more in connection, a more fluid way of relating to the world. So it's all about, of course, also having independent practice. It's all about existential questions, but it's also how do you exist within this world in relation to other forms of living entities, but also with objects and with what type of things you are surrounding yourself with. So, yeah, to me it's about, of course, thinking about matter, but then thinking about being and being alive too. I don't know if it's replying.
I think it's, fascinating. It is. Jean, were you going to add something to that point, actually?
Well, I wanted to react to what you say because it is very interesting. Of course, probably the design is also produced, as you say, by the state of the world at a certain moment. But in a way, I'm interested in also in seeing in your works, both of you, of everything which is refused. Of course, you accept technology, but you create shapes that the technology has not been done for exactly. So you have to transform the technology, to push it further, to push it, to modify the possibility, the technique possibilities. In fact, you fight with the technology. You don't just use it. When you do objects that seems to be non-productive, no production object, no mass production object, in fact, there is something that you refuse in the world. There are a lot of refusals when you do an object, which are very interesting, just that you don't accept the world. You modify it, you fight with it, that's what you were saying, and you refuse the possibility that an object is just, you are the owner of one of the 10 million objects that are alike. You refuse this, you refuse to just obey to the technology, you refuse to have objects that are just useful, you want to have to spend space and to spend money and to spend activity on things that seems to be just poem. A poet is a poet is a world inside a human being in a way. So that's what you are doing. You are doing more poems, and that's maybe exactly what needs our society nowadays.
And I think, Jenna, that you said that about your work, where it's very sort of intuitive and you follow different courses and it's varied. But again, I guess you're fighting against things, but also experiencing sort of new materials and from the places that you travel to and the people that you meet as well.
Yes.
No, if you could sort of explain that variety of work that because when we have spoken before, that you mentioned that you don't sort of box yourself into sort of one area of work.
Yeah.
You're very much sort of, it can be one thing one week and then another thing the next week, but it's very sort of attuned to what you're feeling inside.
Yeah. I think I've always been very impressed by very versatile practices, and to me it means freedom too. It would be very hard, but it's just my point of view, to pick only one material, because I feel that there are so many that can incarnate feelings that I don't want to choose one. I think it's also a way not to get bored, like never to get bored. There are many people that I'm super impressed by that were very criticized before because they had too much versatility in their work. For example, this guy called Dagobert Pesch from Werkstatt, and he was doing lace work, cabinet making, and he did like half usual, half unusual objects, and he was so much criticized because of that, and I think he's a genius.
But is it more about, do you feel that designers more today focus or start or begin a project with the narrative rather than, say, a material, and they focus on the sort of the message that they want to relay through the project, and that then allows them to work with a multiplicity of different materials and craftspeople and technology, because it's about what they're trying to evoke rather than what they're trying to portray maybe visually?
To me, the world of design today is the place where there is the more freedom. So I think there are a multiplicity of passes that young designer can take. And it doesn't matter how and which path they take. If the work makes sense, is incarnate, to me, it's the most important thing. I don't have like any problem with new technology. I'm just not able myself maybe to use them, or I don't have the sensitivity to work with them. I have many friends who do very, very nice work thanks to new softwares, and I think it's incredible. But as I said, for me today, and it was not like that 10 years ago, design is becoming really the most free space in the creative world, where you can really decide to do whatever you want if you make it. with sense.
No, absolutely. Joseph, do you want to add to that? I think you're on the forefront of seeing designers come through. It really is that freedom of expression, I guess, is very vivid at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that is also worth reflecting on, and especially in the context of an event like this, Maison&Objet, is also the reality of being a designer. And I think that one of the sort of the elephant in the room is also the contrast between the kind of work produced by young emerging talents, experimental designers, who in a way are positioned or positioning themselves or being positioned more as something that is perhaps between art and has a certain kind of connection to the tradition of craft that is much more about the singular object and the reality that we can see all around us, which is about the marketplace. Of course, the other is also marketplace, but here we're talking about serially driven industrial production market. And yet somehow these two, which are really at almost irreconcilable in terms of their everything from scale to volume of production to economies to conceptual positioning and so on, they both fall under this umbrella of design. And in a way that's kind of a paradox that remains unresolved. And maybe it's also interesting to reflect on the fact that needs this in a way. The fact that we're here is not a coincidence. It's also something that's needed in order to be able to, and whether they're two strands or tracks that run in parallel, or whether maybe in the future there's a kind of a convergence or an overlap. We were talking about this earlier also, the centrality of craft in a fair like this today obviously is something that's very interesting to notice with Jeanne over lunch, also speaking with the director of Maison&Objet, how important craft has become in order to kind of compensate the perception that design is all about limitless, commodified, unlimited production elements. Craft brings back in that human element, which is, of course, central to the work of these designers.
100%, and I think a lot of it comes back to purpose. You know, what is the purpose behind what we're doing? And, you know, designers like Audrey and Jenna, you know, have such a mission and purpose behind that. And hopefully some of the larger brands can take inspiration from that as well in places like this. So it's a very fascinating, as you say, it's a huge paradox. It's to sort of put them together. But I think we've got some time for questions from the audience. If anyone has any questions for the panel, now is your chance. It would be great to hear from you. I'm sure you all must be bursting with ideas and questions. Don't be shy. Someone's got to be first. Any questions at all? I'm surprised. I thought the topic of technology is clearly not one that's provoked many thoughts as yet. I guess looking forward to the future, how do you? I mean, back to you, Audrey. I think how do you see it sort of progressing? And I guess maybe if you could give us a bit of an insight into sort of what the future holds for you as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I got asked quite often, and I still don't have an answer because I cannot really predict. But I think it's interesting that my work is viewed as something that could be futuristic, while I think it does tell a lot about the now. But it's also, it would be too easy to say that I work in the now and we shouldn't think about the future because we are all, and also as maker, responsible for what comes next. And maybe something that we didn't touch today is maybe the idea of craft technology and ecological concerns. It's too big of a topic to just say beautiful words about it, but maybe something that I can also ask to the people next that are here. And I don't have a practice that is solution-driven, but it is, as a practitioner, a question that I have. And I also think that question that technologies should help us to navigate, but also maybe because you could assume that technologies and the digital is envisioning the world as mechanistic, but maybe we could use them as tools to look at the world maybe more in a spiritual way, to go back on Jenna's practice. And so maybe we finish on that and I let you bounce on it.
No, I think that's great. And as well, you know, when we look at the huge global issues that we face today, you know, climate change and things, you know, technology is going to be the key to change. But again, you're right, it's about connecting it maybe more to the spiritual world. Jenna, do you have thoughts on that?
I don't want to be the one who representing the past, but just to say something. And to come back onto the Inuit people, because I think I'm in love with these people, but I think we also should look a little bit and with wide eyes open to these people, because they are keeping a relation with nature that we totally lose. And even if these people are hunters, and it's hard to speak about that today, but they have no other choice. They are respecting nature and animal much more than us. And I think we should really try to learn from this kind of communities that are keeping the connection, the magical connection. We should go back with nature and with what is surrounding us.
100%. And even if you look back, you know, 50, 60, 70 years, we were repairing things. We were a lot more circular in our, you know, in our lifestyles anyway. So I think, you know, there is that huge importance of drawing from the past and manifesting it in the present. And then that creates, you know, the future that we envisage, which I think is, you know, so important. And that's where designers can play a role in kind of predicting what that might look like for us. But yeah, Audrey, did you want to add anything to that? No?
No, but I do not see your practice as something referencing the past. Actually, I find it so valid today because we lose that type of connections, and everyone needs it. And I do think we can find it into objects, and whether you do it with traditional craft or by the means of digital technologies, all these processes of translation, they are imbuing things with powers. So I think at the end we might be looking at the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a fascinating kind of conclusion. John, did you want to add something?
I was impressed by what you said. That was an extraordinary moment for design. It is more free than ever. It is extremely effective, and it is at all the moments you have in history, you have some disciplines that are leading the sensitivity of a period. For instance, you were speaking of the death of Barnett Newman, Pollock, Rothko. This was the 50s, and it was extremely important. And it's true that at that moment, painting was really a kind of we had a very strong attention on this. And it's true probably that in the 60s, because of the Nouvelle Vague and other, the cinema was really a leading point that all the artists were looking at. And I see now that the artists are looking at design, craft very well, and it is a moment in which we have a fantastic energy that comes from design and propose new shapes, new attitudes, and new souls. So it's very interesting. The best moment.
Amazing. I think that is a good note to finish on. The best moment. But yeah, I think it's been a really, really insightful talk into kind of how the past and present and future kind of interlink and kind of, as Audrey just mentioned, you know, maybe we're looking at the same thing. And I think that is, you know, is a very cohesive way to look at it. So thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to the panelists. It's been very, very inspirational to listen to you all. So thank you for your insight. And again, enjoy the rest of Maison&Objet.